Hello guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to turn your manga from this to this. It doesn't matter how simplistic your art style is, it doesn't matter how complicated your art style is, because in manga there are some rules you kind of have to follow if you want to achieve that more professional look that mangas like Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, Black Clover and Berserk have. And the first thing I want to talk about is originality. As simple as it may seem, it's so critical when it comes to how good your manga looks. While I go through each tip, I'm going to be redesigning one of my old pages that I drew quite a while back. Alright, well, originality. Originality is how unique your manga looks, aside from everything else. From the clothes they wear, to just the way the eyes are drawn. No matter what the design is, the way you draw that design is what really sets you apart from every other artist. It's what sets us apart from comic artists or realism art. First things first, how unique is my art style? Do I draw eyes like 90% of other manga artists? Or do I have a specific way I want to draw them? Look at your art style. Are there any other artists that draw like you? And if so, do they do it better? Because most of the time, yes, they probably do. So think about it. What made their art style so unique compared to yours? The one that you're being inspired from. What makes both of you different from each other? I'll tell you what that is. Line art, detail, proportions, and composition. Now, what does this all mean? Well, let's go into the first one. Line art is how you use your lines. Is it thick or are they thin? How heavy are they? Do they contrast into the drawing or do they stay away from them? For example, when I draw, I don't like to keep my line art and my shades together. They have normally a massive contrast between them. You can see the lines standing out, which is what most manga artists do, but some artists don't do that, and some artists completely let the lines go into their shading. So think about how your outlines are going to look in every single drawing that you do, in every single face that you draw, in every single cloth and weapon that you decide to draw, or anything that you do in your manga. Think about how the lines look. Are they rough? Are they just sketchy? Are they really clean? Just make sure you pick something and stay consistent with it. Don't change it throughout the manga. Stay consistent with whatever line art you pick. This one's pretty simple to wrap your head around. How detailed is it? Some people don't want their art style to be really heavy, detailed work. Some people want it to be simplistic and nice, kind of like Dragon Ball. It's not too detailed. It has what it needs and that's it. Or we could have something like One Punch Man where it's basically realism. Just think about if you saw this item in real life. Let's say you draw a sword. How do the shadows look? How would the scratch realistically look? How cartoonish are you willing to go? Because obviously in manga we exaggerate a lot of stuff, so how much are you going to exaggerate? Are you going to make the scratches extreme, really rash, or are you going to make them really realistic, like thin and as if it was a real damaged blade? And also it obviously just depends on the situation. Just make sure you know to what extent you want it to be detailed to, and stay consistent with that. Proportions are just probably the easiest one to understand, but one of the hardest to learn. Proportions are just how well is everything shaped compared to everything else. For example, is your arm the right size? Is a head the right size? Does it look normal? Because there are some art styles like in One Piece where Oda draws with extremely weird proportions, but it makes sense because of how consistent it is, and the art style with the line art, the details that he does, everything just sums up, so it all adds up. You need to understand and see to what range you want to change the proportions and keep it consistent. Again, just always keeping it consistent. Make sure that your proportions look normal. You can't have an arm that's too big and say, oh, it's just the art style. Because if the line art and everything else doesn't fit it, then no. Simply, it just needs to be fixed. If people are pointing it out, then there's something wrong with it. Because people don't point out Oda's weird proportions or encode yes. Why? Because it looks professional. It looks like it's intentional. If your work doesn't look intentional, it will never be professional. It's as simple as that. So just learn anatomy, and after you learn the rules, that's when you're allowed to break them. Composition is a lot of very small key elements that build up an image in itself. For example, the position, the specific contrast or shading or techniques that you use to actually draw, not the art style as much, but it really does affect how your work comes together. So just think about the angles, where you want things to look from, how you want the viewer to see this character, because the angle that they look at you, the way that someone's position really does affect how effective a panel can be. So just remember this little element of just remembering the angles, remember how much contrast you want in this image, remember what expression you want, because if you get an expression right and you're like, it's good enough, don't leave it as it's just good enough. Make that expression however much you want it, because your viewer is not going to know what's going on in your head. Your viewer is not going to know what you are trying to interpret. So make it obvious by the facial expressions, the angles and the contrast and every single little detail. That's what makes a professional manga artist. And it's all just practice and practice. At the end of the day, just practice all these 4 things, and one day you will be amazing.